good morning.
Good morning, Keith. There you go. Blue and white today. Real soft.
I've gone with the ancient theatre plotted today. A bit of advertising for my beautiful city.
An amazing array and range of mugs, Keith. I'm most impressed. And of course, your T-shirt. Show everyone your T-shirt.
Yes, we've got a branding T-shirt now. It's actually from a Mexican band called Cafe Tacuba. I hope they don't mind me purloining their wonderful image. It's great music as well, I have to say. And so Phil and I are going to be Tweedledum Tweedledee at some point in the near future with these.
That's right. I'm going to get my own T-shirt as well, and we shall both appear in the same stuff.
Yeah, and it's not to kind of be silly about what we're doing, because we've got a serious theme today. Finally, we're going to deal with the cognitive discourse functions, and we keep mentioning these tantalizingly, don't we, in our discussions, and we've got a wonderful contribution from Christian Dalton-Puffer, professor at University of Vienna, who is part of this coordinated network for studying how teachers deliver the thinking demands of their curriculum guidelines through language. Not necessarily CLIL, its mother tongue, as well as CLIL. So we'll have that contribution. I thought we should start, Phil, by actually listing what the CDFs are. You know, yes. It sounds a bit dull, but I think we just need to get that in there. And I've got it written down here. Okay, so there are 7 of them.
Yep.
And they're basically categorize, define, describe, evaluate, explain, and explore. Yeah. And the study that Christiane and her team carried out was they scrolled through lots of curriculum documents looking for phrases that they could group within these broad 7 areas. So they found lots of synonymous phrases, but they went with these 7.
You missed one, Keith. You missed one.
Did I miss one? What did I miss out?
You missed the last one, report.
Report, excuse me. Yeah, I've broken them up in a document to kind of give examples that we can come back to. But so we've got those discourse functions that they looked at in the curriculum documents. And then the second thing the study did, and I'll link the study again in our notes, Phil, because I think it's a good read for colleagues. They looked at teacher expectations of their learners by prompting teachers to produce what they think is the ideal output product within their curriculum goals of their learners. And they found that teachers are they have very high expectations of their learners, while not necessarily working on the whole range of those discourse functions that are in the curriculum guidelines.
Yeah, I had an idea as well to kind of help colleagues remember the 7 of them, and you did them. And how I do it, because I'm getting old and I forget stuff now, is I think of 2 bookmarks at either end, 2 single bookmarks, and inside them there's an alphabetical order which extends, and then it's bookmarked. So you get the first bookmark, I will start with alphabetical C, categorize or classify, not categorize, and then it's a double one, it's the CD, isn't it? It's describe and define, and then you get the expanding E, and you get the 3 E's, you get the explore, explain, and evaluate, and then you've got the bookmark at the end of report. That's the only way I can remember them all.
No, it's a great mnemonic, really. In preparing for today, I never even thought about doing something like that. It's a really great idea. I'll sit down and do that myself. But I thought, without further ado, let's hand over to Christiane herself, because she and I met for a very short Zoom. I wanted to ask her some simple questions. What are they? Why she thinks they're important? And then what the connection is with CLIL. So let's do that.
And I also think that, people listening should realize also that, Christiane Dalton-Puffer is very much, as she said, she didn't invent them, but she did put them into this kind of 7 set block, as it were, to try to make them more comprehensible. And so, CDFs by CDP, they go quite well. I mean, she is really Miss or Ms. CDFs, cognitive. I mean, she's very much responsible for what we're talking about today.
So good morning, Christiane. It's really wonderful to have you with us. And we're going to deal with cognitive discourse functions this week in our Cafe CLIL with Phil. And you're really a key person, I think, to tell us a little bit about what they are, why they're important, and maybe make a connection with CLIL at the same time.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, Keith. I'm very happy to do that. The CDFs, well, maybe it's nice to instructive to give a bit of background, in which background they arose. I am also a trained history teacher, so I'm not 100% a language person only. That was one thing. And then in the early 2010s, the CLIL research team started realizing it's not only a context for acquiring language, that we have to do more. This has to be more focused on the content classroom. And at the time, at my home university, I was also working in a research platform with subject educators from 14 different subjects. And I got a lot of insight also in their conceptualizations of what they're doing. So, yeah, I mean, the task I set myself, what I thought we need, is something that really speaks to these content educators who, at least in my Austrian context, are the people who do CLIL, this hard CLIL, what we do here, and in many other European contexts as well. So, yeah, the idea was so in the classroom we have to think through new concepts. The teacher has to explain them, illustrate them for the students, and the students have to think through them. But a lot of it, in very many subjects, happens through language and language only. Yeah. Supported, of course, by visual media. So I did go shopping around. I mean, obviously, I was not the very first person who has thought about that kind of thing. But I found a lot of that was very still too linguistic for what I was thinking of, or it was Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills, which is not language oriented enough. Let's say there's many thinking skills in there, and there should be, which are not language based. So yeah, in the end, I think one could say that the CDFs are a subset of something like Bloom's taxonomy, but really the language-based thinking skills. That's the idea.
Yeah.
What I also did was go through through subject curricula, looking at what are the learning goals there, and in the present generation of curricula that are very outcome oriented, there are these goal formulations about what the students need to do.
Yeah.
They're not very often really explicitly directed at languaging, but if it says students have to be able to explain the reasons for this, that, or the other, how else but through language could they do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the construct, as I called it itself, is really a construct. I mean, it's not empirically validated by any neuroscience research. This was really a linguistic analysis of curriculum documents and grouping near synonyms together, basically. It's not cast in iron in any way. And it has also turned out that in application, there are overlaps between the categories, and of course they are combined into moves in longer stretches in the classroom discourse. That is perhaps also something that I would like to add, is that my thinking arose in the context of how can I explain what's going on during a lesson. So classroom interaction, classroom discourse. But the CDF construct has also been applied to analyzing materials, to looking at exam questions, and lately also again at European curricula. And it's been applied in a number of studies now for developing also didactic sequences, teaching sequences in various.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I mean, it's a great background for us to follow up with. Do you want to give your example? Should we start with your example you mentioned from?
Yeah, from Tom Morton's article. It was actually from the Madrid Bilingual Project, where they tried to experiment a little bit in CDFs, no, and trying to in upper primary.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there's a brilliant example, and it relates to what Christiane says, because the CDFs are much less scary than they seem to be. You know, I have them for breakfast. I have them with marmalade every morning. I love them, you know. And why do I love them? Because in my work for the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years, they've helped me think about how I write materials, you know? And the materials themselves having that communicative intent that she talks about. And it's very important to think about why CDFs are part of the communicative movement, let's say. Well, because it's much easier. It's much easier to see it. Actually, so just before I give you the example, there's a great quote also. Tom Morton says, he says, although CDFs are a very useful way of tidying up the messy area of learning intentions and their verbal representations. That's great. CDFs are a very useful way of tidying up the messy area of learning intentions and their verbal representations. And that's absolutely true, because particularly in language teaching, there's that horrible sort of massive dense forest that you walk into as a language learner and you go, oh my God, you know, when am I ever going to come out of this? You know, when will I ever see the wood for the trees? But when you look at it in terms of subject teaching, it gets easier. Anyway, the example is great. I've got it here. What they tried to do in this experimental project was to try to get these primary kids using the CDFs. I'm not quite sure how they did that. I don't think that they talked to these 10-year-olds saying, hey, there are 7 CDFs and we're going to... I don't think they did that. No? Yeah. But they must have guided the writing in some way. And Tom's put 2 examples, student A and student B, and student B is the better example. It's what I'll read. But what's interesting is that Christiane says that there's overlap. No, there's always overlap with
Absolutely.
Functions. You know, you're never going to just get one discourse function in any one class or even in any one utterance or text. Now that's also important, but to identify them, it's great. I love this. So this boy writes, they've got to talk about ecosystems. They've been working on ecosystems and they've got to report about it. So he says, hi, my readers, kind of a blog genre then. I am going to talk about ecosystems, or he says, I'm going to talk about the ecosystems. Well, okay, grammatical mistake, we don't care. An ecosystem is a community formed of a habitat, living things, and interactions between living things themselves and the habitat. Full stop. Great sentence.
Fantastic.
But what is it? Well, it's a definition. An ecosystem is a community formed of a habitat, living things. That's a straight definition, okay? Second sentence. I have helped a lot to the environment. It's very Spanish, no? I threw the rubbish to the trash can. Rubbish with 1B, the rubbish. We don't care. I haven't killed animals like ants, and I have recycled the rubbish. Full stop. Well, what's that? Well, he's reporting. He's kind of narrating. He's reporting what they did, which is part of scientific experimental discourse. No. Next sentence. If I wanted to introduce a new species, I will choose the dinosaur. Okay, interesting choice. It is a strong, savage, and very big. The name of the dinosaur would be T-Rex. Okay, well, what's he doing there? No? If I wanted to introduce a new species, well, I think that Christiane would say that that's exploration, because he's saying something that's potential. No, it doesn't exist, but it's potential. It's like almost like a hypothesis. No? The ecosystem of Boadilla is a calm and clean ecosystem. The ecosystem of Hervas is a mountain ecosystem. Aha. Classification, no? Categorization, contrasting the 2 towns. I will introduce the peregrine falcon in Boadilla because there are a lot of mouses. I will introduce the peregrine falcon because there are a lot of mouses. Explanation, because it uses cause and consequence. If there's a because, if there's a causal marker, then it's explanation.
Yeah.
On and on it goes. You know, in Erdvast the monkeys because there's a lot of trees and the dinosaur. And then, then at the end it says it is the best ecosystem with the dinosaur because there are a lot of animals to eat. So there will be less animals. It is very important because if we do not protect the environment, we can die. What's that? That's evaluation. No, that is the kid is giving his or her perspective on that. It's a value statement. No? So within those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are 10 lines there. A 10 line text. All 7 discourse functions are there.
Yeah.
And it sounds natural. Well, let's say it sounds natural from the perspective of a scientific text. No?
Yeah. Well, I wonder how old did you say the children were in that?
10, 11.
10, 11. I wonder what prompts they had. You know, they probably had some quite useful prompts, didn't they, to be able to produce that?
That I don't know, Keith, but the natural, I just like the natural aspect of it. And again, there's all sorts of
no, it's great. It's really great, and it's so revealing, isn't it, when you have a look at a product like that from a learner. It would be interesting to have a look at what the curriculum guidelines are saying as well. You know, it probably matches very nicely with everything that the teachers are expected to carry out. Is all there in that final product. I've got sounds like a simple example, but in Anglia School, I've been thinking about practice and how we move from simpler, let's say, discourse functions like describe to more complex functions like explore, hypothesize, for example. And one simple activity we do, Phil, is with mixing colours with our young learners group. They hear red and yellow makes orange, for example. It's a descriptive sentence. But my teachers are very clever in the way that they move from that to what happens if we mix blue and yellow. And in a way, you know, it's subliminal, but it's also strategic because that's in our curriculum documents. We plan for language in that way to flow from simpler to more complex. Even with our youngest learners, you know, they're learning later hypothesis language, hypothesis structures that will be recycled in other contexts.
Well, I was just thinking when you were speaking when you were saying that you know, when you think about, again, very young learners, teachers teach very young learners a lot of the times with stories, and often you can think of the classic very young learners all sitting on the floor and the teacher's got the book, you know, and I just imagine I was just imagining a scenario there when you were talking, like there's the teacher shows the book and the teacher says, look here, look what we've got, look, we can see 2 lions, no, 2 lions, and the kids go, yeah, and they say, are the lions different? And it's a male and a female lion, and they say, yes, one has got a big, what do we call that? The mane, yes, one's got one hasn't got a big mane, yeah, that's the man and that's the woman one, that's the different lions. And they go, yeah, and then you say, but something else in the picture, no? And one of the kids says, yes, there is a man, he's running away. And the teacher says, yes, the man is running away. Why is the man running away? Right, we've moved into another CDF. We've had description of the 2 lions. Suddenly we move it up and we say why, and the child is going to have to use a causal marker because he is frightened. You know, very simple example, but you're moving up also on the cognitive scale there. You're asking the child to explain. Bronkart, who I think Christian has you didn't reference him explicitly, but Jean-Paul Bronkart, the Geneva School, talked about text genres, and I think that CDFs fit in very nicely with text genres. No? But this idea that you move around text genres as well. This is narration, no? This is narrative, and within narrative, what you're going to get, we don't just get description, as you say. You also get, you know, cause and effect.
Cause and effect. I mean, a couple of other examples I've written down here. For example, we're doing seeds now, Phil, your favourite Anglia School topic, because obviously spring is just around the corner. And our children are learning all about plants which grow, so foods from plants which grow below ground and above ground. They're categorizing food items. Yeah. Parts of plants that we eat, so roots, stalk, leaves, flowers, they're categorizing all of those there. Then they're looking at process by potting. They're already beginning to pot seeds in Anglia School right now. And I'm very excited this year because of we've got a polytunnel here in the village garden. So I'm going to make that go full circle this year. We're looking forward to having the kids come and visit and plant what they shoot in the classroom and go full circle. You know, they can actually see from seed to harvest. And I think, you know, it's thinking about the thinking skills in that way from beginning through full circle, as I've described it, is really, it's the magic of the content curriculum that I think the language curriculum could benefit hugely from if teachers were allowed to experiment in their language curriculum.
Well, I was just going to pick out four points from what Christiane had said, actually, and just maybe move it on in that sense. That she said that what she was trying to do was how to describe what's going on in the classroom. That brings it down nice. How to describe what's going on in the classroom. Absolutely. You know, we're not just talking about subject. It's easy to see it. Yeah. It's easy to see it in subject, and easy to see it in CLIL, I think, because of course we narrow it in a sense, in a funny way. You're narrowing down the visibility of the discourse in certain subjects. Right? You're narrowing it down, and then of course you expand it. But she also says there are overlap among the categories. Well, we saw that very clearly in the example I was reading from. No? She talked about exam questions, and she talked about materials. Well, I can talk about materials in a minute, but if you look at exam questions, that's a brilliant example because, you know, in CLIL, I've become very, very aware in teacher training, certainly, about how you write the instruction for the exam. And of course, you have to use a verb. You have to use a verb. And Christiane says in one of her main articles about that it's all about the verbs in a sense, no? And that's why in fact, she uses 7 verbs for the CDFs now. But that itself is significant. If you say in an exam, in assessment, explain in physics, you know, physics, there's a lot of explanation in physics, isn't there? That's why I found it difficult. But, you know, explain why this will not move or something, or explain why this object will only move a certain distance. No. Explain. Well, okay, that's a CDF. You've got to know how to respond to that. No, but if you say in an exam, describe you do not want explanation. And okay, very simply, or report or define. Well, what Christiane's saying is that the assessment criteria have to be linked directly to the verb in the instruction. And if they're not, the exam itself becomes invalid. It's not reliable. You know,
I mean, an example I can throw in there, I've used before, and I thought fit very nicely into this discussion about exam questions, is one about the Treaty of Versailles. In a history context, students are expected to write an essay evaluating reactions from Germans to the Treaty of Versailles. And I explored this. I had a look at some output products, a bit like your nice example from the 10-year-old. And I was kind of auditing language. I was looking for linguistic expressions for evaluating in order to be able to feed that into the lesson sequence where they'll be learning about the Treaty of Versailles. To then help them when they have to sit down and write this essay. You know, it's a very rich, full and huge area of language, as you can imagine, that are expected to produce in the test item. And I think largely what Christiane Dalton-Puffer's study and the team's study shows is that, coming back to Biggs, there can be huge mismatches between what's expected and what happens in the classroom. And I think, you know, CLIL goes a long way to bringing that to parity. You know, what's expected in the curriculum is acted on in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, again, in the project here, we found that, you know, when we'd written all the materials for 4 years, you know, from 12 to 16, when we look back at them, we found actually that we hadn't included enough CDFs. We hadn't got enough of them in, or looking at it from Broncart's perspective, we didn't have enough genres. No? I keep talking about Broncart. There's a useful thing to add here. Broncart came up with this idea that tech genre was actually a social construct, no? And that what we basically developed them because of needing. You know, his good example is in the Enlightenment. You know, when people started experimenting, and there were experiments in the Enlightenment. People went mad. They're experimenting because, of course, the veil had been lifted, and they could do that. Well, what happened was, of course, when you had so many people experimenting, they suddenly realized, oh, hang on a minute, we've got to write down the results and we've got to talk about the results. So, of course, this created a text genre that we now accept as scientific report, you know, the reporting of experiments. And then the subsequent CDFs that you might use if you're writing an academic paper, where you'd use all of them. But we sort of realized that maybe we not got enough genres, and maybe we'd not got enough CDFs, and we redid the materials, and Christiane's work was really helpful. If you like, I'll give an example. One of the again, it's a lovely example like yours. It was for 11, 12-year-olds, and one of the units we did was about the sea. It goes on for about 2 months. But why do 11, 12-year-olds want to talk about the sea? Well, if you live in the middle of a continent, you might want to know about the sea. And if you live by the sea, then you also might want to know about it and communicate it. Now, this was the justification for this unit. And it had 3 sections. And at the end of this unit, these little kids had to make a poster. It was a conventional cardboard poster, and it had 3 columns. Okay. Yeah. And because they'd been through all this content for about 6 weeks, they had to stand by their poster, and the other kids will walk past and they'd say, we have got these 3 things. And the 3 columns were the following. Okay. The left-hand column was called a sea creature. So they had to choose a sea creature, something weird, preferably, you know, something sort of interesting and weird. And they had to just describe it. There's probably a photograph of it or a screenshot of it on the poster, or they might draw it. No? They say, we have chosen this sea creature. It is an orca. It is da-da-da. Description. Okay. In the second column, okay, they had to talk about what we called sea movement. So it's a bit more scientific. It was called ocean motion. And they had to talk about tsunamis and waves and how they worked in tidal movements. A bit more difficult. Explanation, you know, they had to talk about a sea movement. Why does a tsunami do this? Da, da, da. And in the third column, it was about a sea event. So the whole unit was on these 3 things.
Okay.
A sea creature, ocean motion, and a sea event. But in the third column, obviously, they talked about, you know, it could have been about Shackleton or, you know, Magellan or something, and they had to look into these and they chose their sea event narration. So the whole thing was based on text genre and CDFs. It's both Broncart and Christiane. No? Yeah. The left-hand column, description. The middle column is explanation, and the third column was report or narrate. Yeah. And we did that explicitly and deliberately.
Well, I think it is coming through more and more. I worked recently with colleagues from the Cyprus Ministry of Education. We were given the task to write 10 lessons for preschool science, and the curriculum document itself has a lot of focus on real life situations for children. Yeah. Imagine, if you can, children working with magnets, and we had to create real life situations where children had to explore magnets in the real world. And we came up with this this situation where we've got a metal car inside a transparent box with a lid, and the children had to figure out how they could move the car without touching the box or taking the lid off or touching the car. So that was our context for them to explore magnets and moving the car. So I suspect but that's from the contents perspective. That's from the science curriculum perspective, I think. And I think in a way, you know, what we're talking about here with CLIL is to bring the language curriculum perspective closer to the content curriculum perspective. And
Absolutely.
CDFs allow us to do that, don't they?
I'm so glad you said that, Keith. I'm just looking at Tom Morton's article again. I just highlighted it because anticipating that one of us might say something like that. He talks about the division between content and language, which is part of why David Marsh, I suppose, invented CLIL, you know. And he says, the division reflects a general problem with CLIL research and practice, the tendency to focus separately on content and language in the curriculum. He says,
absolutely.
Studies which focus on language learning tend to pay little attention to the content being studied, while studies which look at content learning outcomes do not usually have an explicit approach to language. Yeah. That's absolutely right. You know, that's.
Listen, I think we should stop there, Phil. That's our time up. But it leaves us the door open to come back to this, I think, because there is so much more we can say